All right, this question is a bit of a hot topic at the moment.
Pun intended.
A few perspectives. What do you guys think about the NVIDIA power connector and its problems? So I think this has been brought up because recently there's been some Reddit threads about people's power connectors on their RTX 4090s melting.
Limited reports so far.
So they're using the new 12-pin power connector, whatever it's called, the HPWR or something.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put up the correct name there. But yeah, there's been a few reports of that connector melting. So you've got one. You've got at least the adapter between.
This is the 4/8 pin, and so this has the official PCI Express 5.0 power connector here with the 4 cents pins and all that, little NVIDIA logo on it. And so you can see how mine naturally goes there. So anyway, I'll explain first what we think we know. So it's to do with how these are bent when connected to your graphics card, because that sort of leverages the pins to reducing the contact patch it has with the actual pins that it inserts into. So my understanding is the optimal configuration is basically that.
Yeah.
Or having the bend back here like that. So you want the cables going into the pins as straight as possible, so they're not pulling on the pins and sort of levering them off.
This wire is directly connected to the pin as opposed to the plastic outer housing.
Yep.
So the outer housing is almost like a separate entity to the pins.
It keeps them somewhat in control, but not.
You bend the wire and the pin does move a little bit, which is again where those contact issues come from.
So basically they're saying that which no one's going to achieve, is that sort of optimal for a 90-degree bend. And not sort of what most people would do, is like something like that.
Yeah, so you bend it from where you can bend it from.
Yeah, which is most people will tuck them up under the card like that.
Yep.
So I'd say that's I don't know how well you guys can see this, but I can possibly add some B-roll, but don't hold me to that. And then they're saying the worst configurations are having them pull like that to the sides. Any sort of way like that is the worst. The worst configuration, because for the leading edge, the pins furthest away from the cable, they're the ones that are under the most pressure and unaligned the most. And then I don't know to what percentage you'd be reducing the contact patch there, but enough to start heating things up and creating arcing and stuff that eventually sets this on fire. So that's the problem as we understand it at this point in time.
I think it's important at this point to state that
that's what I was about to say.
This issue is a separate issue to the
connectors
supposedly failing after 30 connects or disconnects on this unit.
Yep.
So the failures that we've seen reported so far have been from either a single connection or very limited connection. So people setting up their graphics card for the first time.
So it's to do with the connection quality.
Bending it. The 30 insertions and whatever, we talked about this in a previous Q&A video, that was misreported and was incorrect. This connector is not going to fail after 30 connections.
It's rated the same as these.
Rated the same as those. The issue appears to be a different issue, which maybe has been a bit conflated with the connector's fragile or fail after 30 connections issue. But this is a separate issue. And the issue is you connect it once, you bend the cables or do something to reduce the contacts inside, and that starts melting the cables.
Guys like BuildZoid have put forth some really good commentary on this, pointing out stuff like, so this connector here is rated for 600 watts. These much larger connectors are rated for 150 watts. So basically these have a far higher safety margin. You're never going to burn one of these up at 150. Basically, you could just about have them just teetering in and almost deliberately arcing them, and you'll struggle to burn them up. Whereas this is very much on the edge of its rating, and smaller pins, less of them. So there's being a lot more is being asked of this than of these four. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So which is potentially the problem. Having said all of that, while we agree with BuildZoid that this is a interesting, well, I don't think he used quite interesting as the word, but this is possibly a suboptimal solution to replacing these four. We don't know for sure if there is a problem with this. We don't know to what degree the problem is. This could very much be a POSCAP situation all over again, where, I mean, it's probably less of that because that turned out to be completely unrelated to capacitors entirely and was a driver issue that was causing the GPU frequency to fluctuate much more rapidly than it should, which caused games to crash. This is clearly a connector problem. What we don't know is how widespread it is. We don't know how prevalent it is. We don't know if the connectors that have burnt up were defective. We don't know exactly how they were installed and what the user had done there. There's a lot of unknowns, and it's not as widespread, I think, as how many reports have there been online now of burnt up connectors?
Like
3, maybe?
A few.
I actually don't know. I don't know. There's a few, but there's not hundreds.
No. We're not talking double digits, I don't think.
No. There's certainly less than 10, at least based on the information I've seen online. And, well, yeah, basically we don't know how likely you are to have a problem with this, whether it's just been, as I said, a couple of defective connectors, or if, it's only early days as well. So we're going to see in 6 months, are we going to see many more instances of these things burning up? I guess that's what we'll have to wait and see. So far, I've been running 3 4090s almost around the clock, one in my streaming PC and then 2 in test systems. The test system one, I've actually put some photos on Twitter. It's just a complete mess. There's cables bent in every single direction because I just plug it in, connect them all up and get testing. I don't care to do proper cable management for test systems. One of them is the correct native cable that goes from an RTX 3.0 power supply, and that thing just reaches. So I've bent the crap out of that to loop it on. Tim just saw that before. He's like, I don't think this is right. And that hasn't had a problem. And the one in my streaming PC, which uses one of these, again, it's connected to the graphics card like that. They go down and across sideways, which is apparently one of the worst ways you can do it. And I've gamed for many, many, many hours and no problems yet. So I guess...
Yeah, I think with all these early things, it's like when we start to see like 1 or 2 issues, there tends to be a bit of a panic where people are like, oh no, I'm going to buy a 4090, I'm going to bend the cables, I'm going to burn my house down. Which we don't
know
have
if that's
enough
true or not.
information at this point. And maybe when this video gets released in a few days, maybe there's been some updates on this situation compared to when we filmed this, because it is kind of a breaking news story at the moment. But I think it's important not to like panic too much about buying a 4090 and the potential of burning your house down. Certainly take a bit more care with installing your cable with these particular GPUs and try not to do the bending behavior that could cause issues. But, when we've got all those people who are having issues, the handful, versus a lot of people who are clearly using 4090s without their cables melting, there's still a very good chance that you're going to not run into issues with the particular connector, especially because, we'll get some more reports over a couple of more weeks of usage, I'm sure. But so far, I don't think any reviewers saw their cables burn up or anything during the review process. No. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like,
we're certainly not saying it's a non-issue, but we're also not saying it's a massive problem either. We're just saying
there's just not enough information.
We need more information, and it's kind of funny because the RTX 2080 Ti, there was possibly some early memory issues or something. Remember, we got the Space Invaders, and everyone jumped. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people jumped the gun saying, "Oh, the 2080 Ti silicon's defective," and there's going to be all these problems ongoing, and it turns out maybe it was a bad batch of memory, and that seemed to just self-correct.
Weren't people like trying to figure out whether they had Samsung or Micron memory back then? They were like, I want the good one and not the bad one. And...
Well, I think it probably was memory related. But either way, it wasn't a defective GPU, and before long that all went away, and I've still got my original 2080 Ti and no dramas, but I did have one that died. But basically there was that. Then we got the 3080, which had the POS cap drama, which turned out to be just a driver bug that was solved quite swiftly, and there was no performance loss there. And now we've got this, which certainly does seem like, at least for the ones that are burning up, is a serious issue. We just don't know how widespread this serious issue is. And as Tim said, we'll hopefully over the coming weeks get more information. And before long, we'll know just how serious and how much of a concern it is. But for now, I don't think we have too much more to say. We've sort of explained what the problem is at this point in time as it's understood. And
I mean, personally, I think the connector, they probably could have just continued to use the existing PCIe 8-pin connectors. There was really not too much that was wrong with those connectors apart from being big. And apparently PCB space is now suddenly an issue for connectors. I'm not sure whether that's a valid concern or not. I think those connectors were fine, but also the new connector has gone through. It's not like they've just made up this connector and are like, oh, now just use it. This is something that has been supposedly tested by many different organizations.
Well, they did burn up at least one in the validation,
Yes.
but that was apparently like it was cable tied to a 90-degree angle or something. And
usually those testing bodies will provide reports to
so it was quite a severe use
NVIDIA.
case.
I think Intel was involved with making the power connector, obviously the PCIe group, all those. It's gone through many different people looking at this issue.
Yep.
So certainly if there was a widespread problem with the connector, there's a lot of people involved with that have made some pretty poor decisions. And, I'm sure NVIDIA has looked at all the information when deciding to use it for the 4090 and their previous GPUs, considering a variation of it was used for some Ampere GPUs as well. So there's a lot of people in the chain here. And I'm not saying that means it's going to be a good working connector, but generally speaking, when things go through that many processes, you'd be hoping that any issues like this are very much edge cases, as opposed to you plug it in and it just burns up straight away.
Yep.
So we'll have to see how that happens. I'm sure NVIDIA will be treating the customers where this has happened to pretty well. I believe they've already got in touch with some of the people that are affected. So, let's hope it's not a widespread issue.